The engine died with a cough, then nothing. Elena Whitmore sat frozen behind the wheel of her $200,000 car, staring at the empty two-lane road cutting through fields she didn't recognize. No bars, no GPS, no one coming. The sun was sinking fast, pulling shadows across the dirt like fingers. She'd spent her whole life controlling everything: boardrooms, investments, people. But out here, none of that mattered. She was just a woman alone in the growing dark, about to knock on a stranger's door. What happened next would crack her world wide open. If you want to see where this goes, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Elena had driven this route 100 times, but never alone and never this late. The meeting in Ashford had run long, some local investor pitching a development she'd ultimately passed on, and she'd waved off her assistant's offer to arrange a driver. She liked the quiet, liked the control, liked not having to make small talk for 2 hours while someone else decided the speed. But now the quiet felt different. She tried the ignition again. Click. Nothing. The dashboard stayed dark. She pulled out her phone, already knowing what she'd find. One bar, flickering, then gone. Perfect, she muttered. She popped the hood and stepped out into air that smelled like cut grass and dirt. The car sat halfway onto the gravel shoulder, sleek and black and completely useless. She stared at the engine like it might apologize. It didn't. Elena Whitmore was 32 years old, worth somewhere north of 50 million, depending on the quarter, and she had no idea how to jumpstart a car. She could negotiate a merger in 3 languages, could read a balance sheet in her sleep, could walk into a room full of hostile investors and walk out with their signatures. But this? A dead car on a country road with the sun going down? She was as helpless as anyone else. She looked around. Fields on both sides, stretching toward distant tree lines. A barn maybe half a mile back, roof sagging like it had given up years ago. No lights, no movement, no signs of life anywhere. The road stretched in both directions like a dare, empty and indifferent. Then she saw it. A glow, faint and amber, off to the left through a thin line of trees maybe a quarter mile in. She locked the car out of habit, though who the hell would steal it out here, and started walking. Her heels sank into the soft shoulder with each step, and she could feel blisters forming already. The air was getting colder, that sharp autumn cold that comes on fast once the sun starts dropping. She wrapped her arms around herself and kept moving. The farmhouse sat back from the road, small and plain, with a porch that looked like it had been rebuilt more than once, white paint peeling in places, a metal roof that had seen better decades. The light came from a single window on the first floor, warm against the deepening blue of dusk. A rusted truck sat in the driveway, one tire flat, weeds growing up around the wheel wells. Chickens moved around in a wire pen near the side of the house, clucking low and settling in for the night. Elena stopped at the edge of the gravel, suddenly aware of how she looked. Silk blouse that probably cost more than a month of groceries for whoever lived here. Tailored slacks with mud on the cuffs now. Heels that were already ruined. Her hair was still perfect. She'd had it done that morning, and she wore a watch that cost more than most people's cars. She didn't belong here, and anyone who opened that door would know it immediately. But her phone was dead, her car was dead, and it was getting cold fast. She could see her breath now. She climbed the porch steps. They creaked under her weight, and knocked. Footsteps inside heavy, heavy and deliberate. A man's voice, low and cautious. Just a second. The door opened. He was tall, broad-shouldered, maybe 30, with dark hair that needed a cut and a face that looked like it had forgotten how to rest. Deep lines around his eyes. A jaw that stayed tight even when he wasn't talking. He wore jeans that had seen actual work and a faded flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows. His hands were scarred and calloused, fingernails rimmed with dirt that didn't wash out. He looked at her for a long second, taking in the expensive clothes and the lost expression, then past her toward the road where her car sat invisible in the gathering dark, then back. "Help you?" he asked. His voice was careful, like he was used to things going wrong. "My car broke down," Elena said. "About a quarter mile back. I don't have signal." He nodded slowly like he was working through a problem in his head. "You hurt?" "No, just stuck." "All right." He stepped back, pulling the door wider. "Come in. I'll see what I can do." She hesitated. Every instinct from her life in the city told her this was a bad idea. You didn't go into strangers' houses. You didn't trust people you didn't know. You kept your guard up and your options open. But she was out of options. "It's fine," he said, reading her hesitation. "I'm not going to bite." Elena stepped inside. Boy, the house was small, clean in the way that meant someone tried even when they were tired. A couch with a quilt draped over one arm, the fabric worn soft from years of use. A table with two mismatched chairs, one with a wobbly leg that had been shimmied with folded cardboard. A kitchen so narrow she could have touched both walls at once if she'd stretched out her arms. It smelled like soup, something with beans and vegetables, and firewood, and underneath that the faint smell of laundry detergent. A little girl sat on the floor near the couch, maybe 6 years old, coloring in a book with crayons spread out around her like a rainbow explosion. She had dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that was coming loose, and she wore pajamas with cartoon characters Elena didn't recognize. She looked up when Elena came in, eyes wide and curious and completely unguarded. "Who's that, Daddy?" "A neighbor," the man said, closing the door behind them. "Her car stopped working. Is she staying for dinner?" "We'll see." The girl went back to coloring, humming something tuneless under her breath, already back in whatever world she'd been building in her head. The man gestured toward the couch. "Sit if you want. I'll grab my coat." "Thank you," Elena said, her voice coming out smaller than she intended. He disappeared into a back room. The girl kept coloring, legs swinging back and forth. Elena sat carefully on the edge of the couch, feeling like an intruder, like she'd stepped into someone else's life without permission. "What's your name?" the girl asked without looking up. "Elena." "I'm Sophie." "Hi, Sophie. Are you rich?" Elena blinked. "What?" "Your shirt's shiny, and you smell like perfume. Rich people smell like perfume." "Sophie?" the man said, coming back into the room with a heavy work jacket on. "That's enough." "I was just asking." "I know, but we don't ask people that." Sophie shrugged, unbothered, and kept coloring. Elena watched the easy way they moved around each other, the familiarity of it. This wasn't a house with a lot of extra space or extra money, but it had something Elena's apartment had never had. It felt lived in. It felt like home. The man looked at Elena. "Sorry about that." "It's fine," Elena said. "She's not wrong." He almost smiled. Almost. Just the corner of his mouth twitching before he caught it. "I'm Caleb." "Elena." "Yeah, I heard." He nodded toward the door. "Come on, I'll take a look at your car." They walked back toward the road together, Caleb carrying a toolbox that looked older than Elena and probably weighed 30 pounds. The sky had deepened to purple now, stars starting to show through breaks in the clouds. It was definitely colder. Elena wrapped her arms around herself and tried not to shiver. "You from the city?" Caleb asked. "Yeah, Hartford." "Long drive." "I had a meeting in Ashford." "Business?" "Always." He didn't ask what kind. Most people did. Most people heard she was in business and immediately wanted to know what sector, what company, what her position was. They were already calculating where she fit in their mental hierarchy, whether she was someone worth knowing. Caleb just walked, the toolbox swinging slightly at his side. They reached the car. Caleb set the toolbox down on the shoulder and popped the hood, leaning in with a flashlight he'd pulled from his jacket pocket. Elena stood to the side, useless and aware of it. "Battery's not dead," he said after a minute, his voice slightly muffled. "Alternator, maybe, or the starter. Hard to tell without the right equipment." "Can you fix it?" "Not tonight." Elena's stomach dropped. She'd been hoping, stupidly probably, that this would be something simple, a loose wire, a quick fix. 5 minutes and she'd be back on the road. "What does that mean?" she asked. "Means I'd need parts. And a lift, probably, to get underneath and see what's really going on." He straightened, wiping his hands on his jeans. The motion left streaks of grease. "You got someone you can call to come get you?" "No signal, remember?" "Right." He thought for a second, looking at the car, then at the darkening sky, then at her. "I've got a landline back at the house. You can use that." "Thank you." They walked back in silence. Elena's mind was already running through logistics. Who to call, how to get a tow out here, where the nearest hotel was, how she'd get there. But when they got back inside and Caleb handed her the phone, an actual corded phone attached to the wall, the kind she hadn't seen in years, she realized she didn't actually know any of those numbers by heart. Everything was in her cell. Every contact, every number, every piece of information she might need. She'd memorized market data and financial projections and the names of 200 business contacts, but she couldn't remember her assistant's direct line. She stared at the receiver in her hand. "Problem?" Caleb asked. "I don't remember the number for a tow company." "There's only one out here. I'll call." He took the phone back and dialed from memory. Didn't even have to look it up. Waited. Frowned. "Voicemail," he said. "They're closed till morning." "Of course they are." He hung up, then looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Evaluating, maybe. Deciding something. "You got people in the city who could come get you?" he asked. Elena thought about it. Her assistant would be home by now, probably already 3 drinks into her evening. Her business partner was in Seattle for the week. She had friends, sort of, but the kind of friends who expected advance notice and wouldn't drive 2 hours into the middle of nowhere at night. "Not at this hour," she said. "Not out here." Caleb looked at her, then at the clock on the wall, an old analog thing that ticked loudly in the quiet. 7:45. "You can stay here tonight," he said. "I'll take you into town first thing tomorrow morning, get the car sorted." Elena stared at him. "You don't even know me." "Don't need to." "I could be anyone. I could be, I don't know, dangerous or something." "Could be. But your car's broke and it's getting dark and cold, so it doesn't really matter, does it?" She didn't know what to say to that. In her world, everything was transaction. You gave something to get something. You built relationships because they were useful. You helped people when it served your interests. This man was offering to help her because she needed help. That was it. No angle. No calculation. "Sophie's already asleep in the only bedroom," he continued, like it was decided. "But the couch folds out. It's not fancy, but it's warm. There's a bathroom down the hall. You need anything else? Just ask." "I can't just—" "You can," he said simply. "It's fine." Elena felt something unfamiliar twist in her chest, something uncomfortable. She wasn't used to people doing things without wanting something back, without keeping score. "Okay," she said quietly. "Thank you. Don't mention it." "What?" Caleb reheated the soup, some kind of vegetable and bean thing, thick and plain, seasoned with salt and not much else, and set a bowl in front of her at the small table. He poured her water in a mason jar, got himself a bowl and sat across from her. Elena ate without really tasting it, too aware of the strangeness of the situation. She was sitting in a stranger's kitchen, eating food she didn't recognize, in a house that could fit inside her living room 3 times over. The chair wobbled under her. The spoon was mismatched with the bowl. Everything was worn and used and old. But the soup was hot, and she realized she was hungry. "You live here alone?" she asked, more to fill the silence than anything. "Just you and Sophie?" "Yeah." "Her mother?" Caleb's jaw tightened, the muscles jumping. He stared at his soup for a second before answering. "Gone." The way he said it, flat and final, told Elena not to push. She'd heard that tone before, in business meetings, when someone didn't want to discuss something. You could push and make an enemy, or you could let it go. She let it go. "It's just us," Caleb said after a pause, like he felt he owed her something more. "Has been for a while now." "That must be hard." "It is what it is." He said it without self-pity, without asking for sympathy, like he was stating a fact. The sky is blue, water is wet, life is hard. You deal with it. Elena set her spoon down. How old is she? 6.5, smart as hell. Talks more than I do, which isn't saying much, but still. That almost smile again. "She's a good kid." "I noticed." "Yeah?" "She seems happy, comfortable. A lot of kids that age would be shy around strangers, but she just talked to me like it was normal. She doesn't know any different. Out here, everyone's a neighbor. You help people when they need it. That's just how it works." Elena thought about her building in Hartford. She'd lived there for 3 years and couldn't name a single neighbor. Didn't know who lived across the hall or 2 floors up. It had never occurred to her to find out. "She seems happy," Elena said again, because it was true, and because she couldn't think of what else to say. "I try." There was a weight in those two words that Elena recognized. She'd spent her whole life trying to prove herself, trying to build something that mattered, trying to earn respect in rooms full of men who thought she didn't belong. But this was different. Caleb wasn't trying to win anything or prove anything. He was just trying to survive, trying to give his daughter a childhood that didn't feel broken. "What do you do?" she asked. "For work?" "Farm. Mostly corn and soy, some livestock, chickens, few cows." He paused, and Elena watched something cross his face. Resignation, maybe, or exhaustion. "Or I did. It's been a rough few years." "Drought?" "That, and debt, and bad timing, and equipment that breaks down faster than I can fix it." He leaned back in his chair, and it creaked under him. "I'm working on it." The way he said it made Elena think he wasn't. Made her think he was drowning and trying to look like he was swimming. They finished eating in silence. Caleb washed the dishes by hand while Elena sat at the table, feeling more out of place by the second. There was no dishwasher. No garbage disposal. He just scrubbed everything in the sink with a worn sponge and stacked it in a drying rack. When he was done, he pulled a blanket and pillow out of a narrow closet and set them on the couch. "Bathroom's down the hall," he said. "If you need anything, just knock on my door. It's the one at the end." "I will. Thank you." He nodded and headed toward the back of the house. Elena heard a door open and close, heard him talking quietly to Sophie, heard the little girl's sleepy voice answering. Elena stood alone in the small living room, listening to the house settle around her. It creaked in places. The refrigerator hummed, loud enough that she could hear it from across the room. Somewhere outside, an animal made a sound she didn't recognize, something between a bark and a howl. She sat on the couch and pulled out her phone. Still no signal. She turned it off to save battery and stared at the blank screen for a minute, then set it aside. She thought about her apartment in the city, floor-to-ceiling windows, marble counters, a view of the skyline that people paid thousands a month just to glimpse. She thought about the meetings she had tomorrow, the deals she was closing, the empire she'd built from nothing with her bare hands and sheer determination. And then she thought about Caleb, washing dishes in a kitchen the size of a closet, raising a little girl alone, holding onto a farm that was probably drowning him one season at a time. She wondered which one of them was winning. She didn't sleep much that night. The couch was comfortable enough, but every sound was unfamiliar. The house creaked differently than her apartment. The darkness was deeper. There were no streetlights, no ambient city glow, just black. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, she heard footsteps. A door opening. Water running. Caleb, probably, unable to sleep either. She lay still and listened to him move through the house, then go back to his room. She stared at the ceiling and wondered what the hell she was doing here. Morning came too early. Elena woke to the sound of footsteps and a child's voice, bright and clear and impossibly cheerful for whatever ungodly hour it was. "Is she still here?" "Shh, let her sleep." "But I want to see if she's real. Maybe I dreamed her." "You didn't dream her. Now go brush your teeth." "But teeth, now." Elena sat up, blinking against the morning light coming through the window. Caleb stood in the kitchen, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. Sophie peeked around the corner, grinning when she saw Elena was awake. "You're awake," Sophie said, like this was the best news she'd heard all week. "I am now." Caleb handed her a mug. "Milk? Sugar?" "Black's fine." He nodded, like he approved, and took a sip from his own mug. Sophie climbed onto the couch next to Elena, legs swinging again, that endless energy already vibrating through her small body. "Did you sleep good?" Sophie asked. "I did, thank you." "Daddy snores. Did you hear him?" "Sophie," Caleb said, but there was no real heat in it. "What? You do?" Elena smiled despite herself. "I didn't hear anything?" "That's because his room is far away. When I sleep in his bed because of bad dreams, I can hear it." Caleb shook his head and went back to the kitchen. Elena watched him crack eggs into a pan, working efficiently like he'd done this 1,000 times, which he probably had. "We'll head into town after breakfast," he said over his shoulder. "Get your car towed to the garage. Probably take a few days to fix, depending on what's wrong and what parts they need to order." "A few days?" "Could be longer, could be shorter, depends." Elena felt panic start to rise. A few days? She had meetings, calls, a presentation on Thursday that she absolutely could not miss. Is there a rental car place nearby? She asked. Not nearby, no. Closest one's probably in Millbrook, about 40 minutes from here. Can you take me there? Caleb turned to look at her. I can, but it's going to cost you most of the morning. You sure you don't want to just wait and see what the garage says first? Elena thought about it. He was right. It was smarter to wait, to get the diagnosis, to make decisions based on actual information instead of panic. Okay, she said. We'll wait. Breakfast was eggs and toast, simple and filling. Sophie chattered the whole time, about school, about a bird she'd seen yesterday that was blue and red, about a drawing she was working on that was going to be the best drawing ever. Caleb listened quietly, adding a word here and there, his presence steady and solid. Elena watched them and felt like she was seeing something private, something she didn't have a right to witness. This easy intimacy, this comfortable routine, they fit together in a way that made her chest ache. When they finished, Caleb grabbed his keys. Ready? Elena nodded. The drive into town took 20 minutes down empty roads that wound through fields and past farmhouses that looked just as worn as Caleb's. Sophie came along, sitting in the back seat and singing quietly to herself. The town was small, one main street with a handful of shops, a diner, a post office, a bank. The garage sat at the far end, a cinder block building with 3 bays and a hand-painted sign that said, Miller's Auto Repair. The tow truck met them there. The mechanic was an older man with grease-stained hands and a skeptical look that suggested he'd seen every kind of car problem and wasn't impressed by any of them. Alternator's shot, he said after 15 minutes of poking around under the hood. Starter's not great either. Probably should replace both while we're at it. How long? Elena asked. Parts got to come in. 2 days? Maybe 3? And how much? $1,500, give or take. Elena didn't blink. In her world, $1,500 was a rounding error. Fine. Do it. The mechanic nodded and walked off to make calls. Caleb leaned against his truck, arms crossed, watching her. You didn't even negotiate, he said. I don't need to. Must be nice. There was no bitterness in his voice, just observation, just stating a fact. Elena looked at him. It is, but it's not everything. No, Caleb said quietly. I guess it's not. Sophie tugged on Elena's sleeve. Can we get ice cream? Sophie, it's 9 in the morning, Caleb said. So? Ice cream is good any time. Not before lunch, la. That's a made-up rule. All rules are made up. Doesn't mean we don't follow them. Sophie sighed dramatically, and Elena found herself smiling again. There was something about the way they bickered that felt warm, safe. I'll tell you what, Elena said. If your dad says it's okay, we can get ice cream after lunch. Sophie's eyes went wide. Really? If your dad says it's okay. Sophie turned to Caleb with the most hopeful expression Elena had ever seen. Caleb looked at Elena, something unreadable in his expression, then back at Sophie. After lunch, he said. And only if you eat real food first. Deal. Sophie hugged Elena's legs, quick and enthusiastic, then ran off to look at something in the garage. Caleb shook his head. You just made a dangerous alliance. Sorry? Now she's going to ask you for everything I say no to. Is that a problem? Remains to be seen. But he was almost smiling, and Elena felt something warm settle in her chest. They drove back to the farm in comfortable silence. Sophie had fallen asleep in the back seat, worn out from the excitement of the morning. When they pulled into the driveway, Caleb carried her inside and laid her on the couch, covering her with the quilt. Elena stood in the kitchen, feeling awkward again. I should probably arrange a ride back to the city. I can work from there while the car gets fixed. You can do that, Caleb said, or you can stay. Stay? You said your car won't be ready for 2 or 3 days. You can stay here. Save yourself the trip back and forth. Caleb, I can't impose like that. You're not imposing. Room's already set up, and honestly, he paused. Sophie likes having you here. She doesn't get a lot of visitors. Elena looked at the little girl sleeping on the couch, peaceful and small. Then back at Caleb. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, Elena said. Thank you. She spent the rest of the day working from Caleb's kitchen table, using his Wi-Fi, which was slow but functional, to answer emails and take calls. Caleb worked outside, and she could see him through the window, fixing a fence or moving equipment, or doing one of the 1,000 tasks that seemed to need doing on a farm. Sophie woke up around noon and immediately asked about ice cream. After lunch, Caleb reminded her. They made sandwiches together, peanut butter and jelly for Sophie, turkey and cheese for the adults, and ate on the porch. The day was warm, the sky bright and clear. Elena couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten lunch outside. After, they drove into town and got ice cream at a place that looked like it hadn't changed since the 1950s. Sophie got chocolate with sprinkles. Caleb got vanilla. Elena got strawberry. They sat on a bench outside and ate in silence, watching the sparse traffic roll past. "This is nice," Elena said. Caleb looked at her. "Ice cream?" "All of it." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, it is." When they got back to the farm, Elena helped Sophie with a drawing while Caleb worked on paperwork at the table. She could see the stack of bills, the furrow in his brow. He was worried about something, but he didn't say what. That night, after Sophie went to bed, Elena and Caleb sat on the porch again. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said. "Sure." "Why did you help me?" "Really?" Caleb thought about it. "You needed help." "That's it?" "That's it. Most people wouldn't have done what you did. Let a stranger into their home, fed them, let them stay. Most people aren't out here. Things are different in the country. You help your neighbors because someday you might need help too. But I'm not your neighbor. You were on my road. Close enough." Elena looked at him, this man who'd opened his door without question, who'd shared what little he had without expecting anything in return. In her world, kindness always came with a price tag. But here, it was just kindness. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You already said that." "I know, but I mean it." Caleb nodded, and they sat in comfortable silence until the stars came out. The next 2 days passed in a strange, suspended rhythm. Elena worked from the kitchen table, taking calls and sending emails, managing her business from a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. Caleb worked the farm, and Sophie orbited between them like a small, cheerful satellite. Elena found herself helping with dinner, learning how to chop vegetables the way Caleb did, how to season soup with just salt and pepper and somehow make it taste good. She helped Sophie with her homework, reading simple books about animals and colors. She sat on the porch in the evenings and watched the sun set over fields she'd never thought about before. And slowly, without meaning to, she started to relax. The constant tension she carried in her shoulders began to ease. The endless mental checklist of things to do, people to call, problems to solve, was still there, but quieter, less urgent. She started sleeping better. On the third day, the garage called. The car was fixed. Elena felt something sink in her chest. Relief, yes, but also something else. Something like disappointment. Caleb drove her into town. They didn't talk much. Sophie sang in the back seat, oblivious to the weight in the air. At the garage, Elena paid the bill and got her keys. The mechanic had done good work. The car started smoothly, no hesitation. She stood next to it, keys in hand, and looked at Caleb. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. Don't mention it. I mean it. You didn't have to do any of this, and you did anyway. Like I said, you needed help." Elena opened her mouth to say something else, but Sophie ran up and hugged her legs. "Are you leaving?" Sophie asked, and her voice was small. "I have to, sweetheart. I've got to get back to work." "Will you come back?" Elena looked at Caleb. He was watching her carefully, expression neutral. "I don't know," Elena said honestly. Sophie's face fell. Elena knelt down to her level. "But I'll tell you what. I'll call. And maybe I can visit sometime, if your dad says it's okay." Sophie looked at Caleb. "Can she, Daddy?" "If she wants to," Caleb said quietly. Elena stood. She wanted to say something, wanted to find words for what the last 3 days had meant, but she couldn't. So she just nodded, got in her car, and drove away. She looked in the rearview mirror and saw Caleb and Sophie standing in the parking lot watching her go, and she felt something crack inside her chest. The drive back to Hartford felt longer than it should have. The city appeared on the horizon, all glass and steel and concrete, and Elena felt nothing. She went back to her apartment. It was exactly as she'd left it, clean, empty, cold. She stood in front of the window, looking out at the skyline she'd conquered, the city she'd made her kingdom, and she felt nothing. She thought about Caleb and Sophie, about the small house and the warm soup, and the way Sophie had asked questions without fear, about the way Caleb had fixed her car without asking for anything in return, about sitting on the porch in the quiet while the stars came out. She thought about the way he'd said, "It is what it is," like acceptance was the only option left, and she wondered what it would take to make it something else. She pulled out her laptop and started searching. Land records, tax filings, debt assessments, property values, bank records, public ones, at least. It took her 3 hours to piece it together, but when she was done, she knew everything. Caleb Hayes, 30 years old, sole owner of a 60-acre farm that had been in his family for 2 generations, mortgaged to the breaking point, behind on payments for 18 months. Foreclosure notice filed 2 weeks ago. He had 30 days, maybe less. The farm was worth maybe $200,000 if he sold it. He owed $63,000. But selling meant losing everything his family had built, meant uprooting Sophie, meant admitting defeat. Elena sat back, staring at the screen. She could write a check right now, pay it off, make the debt go away. But something stopped her. Caleb hadn't wanted her money when she'd offered to pay him for fixing the car. He'd looked almost offended by the suggestion, like she'd insulted him. And if she just showed up with a check to pay off his mortgage, he'd refuse. She knew he would. His pride wouldn't let him accept it, so she'd have to do something else, something bigger, something that gave him dignity instead of taking it away. She opened a new tab and started making calls. 3 days passed before Elena made her first move. She sat in her office on the 14th floor, city noise muted by triple-pane glass, and reviewed the file her attorney had compiled. The land surrounding Caleb's farm belonged to a holding company that had gone bankrupt 6 months ago. The parcels were being sold off piece by piece, mostly to developers looking to flip them or turn them into subdivisions. 200 acres, give or take. Cheap, if you knew where to look and had cash to move fast. Elena knew where to look. She called her lawyer. "I want all of it." "All of what?" "The parcels adjacent to the Hayes property, everything that borders it, every single acre." There was a pause on the other end. "That's a lot of land, Ms. Whitmore. What are you planning to do with it?" "I'll figure that out later. Just get it done." "It'll take a few weeks to close all those transactions." "I don't have a few weeks. Offer cash." "Close it in 7 days." Another pause, longer this time. "All right, I'll make the calls. But Miss Whitmore, this is going to raise questions. People will want to know what you're building. Let them wonder. I want this quiet. No press releases, no announcements, just get the land." "Understood." Elena hung up and stared at the skyline. She'd built her fortune on calculated risks, on seeing opportunities others missed, on being willing to move when everyone else was still thinking. But this wasn't about profit. This wasn't even about logic. This was something else entirely. Her assistant knocked and poked her head in. "Your 2 o'clock is here." "Cancel it." "Ms. Whitmore, it's the Brennan deal. You've been working on this for 3 months. I said cancel it. Reschedule for next week. Tell them something came up." The assistant blinked, nodded, and disappeared. In 3 years of working for Elena, she'd never seen her cancel an important meeting, never seen her deprioritize business. Elena turned back to her computer and pulled up the property records again. She traced the borders of Caleb's farm with her cursor, thinking about the way he'd looked at her when she'd offered him money for fixing the car. Like she'd insulted him, like charity was worse than struggle. She wasn't going to make that mistake again. But she also wasn't going to let him lose everything because of pride. She picked up the phone and started making more calls. Agricultural consultants, sustainable farming experts, equipment suppliers. She spent the next 2 days talking to people who knew about crop rotation and soil management and irrigation systems and livestock integration. She asked 1,000 questions and took notes on everything. By the end of the week, she had a plan. Tout. Caleb stood in the barn, staring at the stack of bills on the workbench. The numbers hadn't changed since yesterday, or the day before, or the day before that. He'd checked them so many times he had them memorized. $63,417. That's what he owed. The bank had been patient, more patient than they needed to be, more patient than he deserved, but patience had limits. The foreclosure notice was pinned to the wall above the bench with a rusty thumbtack, official and final and impossible to ignore. He had 3 weeks left, 21 days. Sophie's voice drifted in from outside, singing something she'd made up, probably to the chickens. Caleb closed his eyes and listened. She didn't know. He'd made sure of that. As far as Sophie was concerned, everything was fine. Daddy was fixing the tractor. Daddy was planning the backfield. Daddy had it all under control. Daddy was lying. He'd been lying for months, lying every time she asked if they were okay. Lying every time she wanted something, and he said maybe later. Lying through his teeth because the alternative was telling his 6-year-old daughter that they were about to lose their home. He folded the bills and shoved them in a drawer. There was work to do. There was always work to do. Standing here staring at numbers he couldn't change wasn't going to help anything. He walked outside and found Sophie sitting on the porch steps, drawing in her notebook with crayons that were worn down to stubs. "What are you working on?" he asked. "A picture for Elena." Caleb stopped. "What?" "A picture. For Elena. The lady who stayed over." "Why?" Sophie shrugged like it was obvious. "She was nice. I liked her. I want her to have a picture." Caleb sat down next to his daughter. The wood was warm from the sun. "Sweetheart, you know she's not coming back, right?" "Why not?" "Because she lives in the city. She's got her own life, her own work, her own everything." "So?" "So people like her don't come out here unless they have to. She was just passing through." Sophie looked at him with those big, serious eyes that made her look older than 6. "Did you like her?" "What?" "Did you like her? I saw you smiling when she was here. You don't smile a lot." Caleb didn't know how to answer that. He'd liked that Elena hadn't treated him like a charity case or like a failure. He'd liked that she didn't ask 1,000 invasive questions or talk down to him the way some people from the city did when they ended up out here. He'd liked the way she'd sat at his table and eaten his simple food without pretending it was something it wasn't or complaining that it wasn't fancy enough. He'd liked the way she'd looked at Sophie with genuine interest, not that fake politeness adults sometimes used with kids. He'd liked her. But liking someone didn't mean anything, didn't change anything. "It doesn't matter," he said finally. Sophie went back to drawing, but she had that stubborn set to her jaw that meant she wasn't letting it go. "I think she liked you too." "What makes you say that?" "She smiled at you. A lot." "She smiled at you too." "Not the same way." Caleb shook his head. 6 years old and already reading people better than he could. She got that from her mother, probably. The ability to see what people weren't saying. "Finish your picture," he said, standing. "I've got to check the fence line." He spent the rest of the day walking the perimeter of his property, checking for breaks in the wire, tightening posts that had worked loose over the winter. Physical work that kept his hands busy and his mind from spinning out. But he kept thinking about Elena anyway. The way she'd looked standing in his kitchen in her expensive clothes, completely out of place but somehow fitting in anyway. The way she'd talked to Sophie like she mattered. The way she'd insisted on helping with dinner even though she clearly had no idea what she was doing. He wondered if she'd made it back to the city okay. Wondered if she'd already forgotten about the 3 days she'd spent here. Probably. People like her had busy lives, important things to do. He was just a detour, a minor inconvenience on the way to somewhere else. He told himself that was fine, told himself it didn't matter. But some part of him, a part he didn't want to acknowledge, wished she would call. Elena's lawyer called on day 5. "It's done," he said. "All parcels acquired. Total came in just under $3 million. Elena didn't even blink at the number. "Good. Now I need you to file permits for agricultural development, sustainable crop rotation, livestock integration, water management systems, solar infrastructure for long-term energy independence, the whole package. You're really doing this." "I really am." "And the Hayes property itself?" "Leave it alone. Don't contact him. Don't send anything to his address. Don't let him know I'm involved in any way until I'm ready. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear." "Anything else?" "Yeah. Find me someone who knows how to run a farm, someone good, not some consultant with an MBA and no dirt under their nails. Someone who's actually done it. Someone who knows the land and the work and what it takes to make it succeed. I'll make some calls. Do it fast. I want options by the end of the week. Elena hung up and leaned back in her chair. The hard part was done. The land was hers. The permits were being filed. The infrastructure could be built in a matter of months if she pushed hard enough and threw enough money at it. Now came the part she couldn't control. Now she had to go back and convince Caleb to take the job. And he was going to fight her on it. She knew he would, because accepting help felt like weakness to men like him. Men who'd been taught that you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, that asking for anything was admitting defeat. She was going to have to make him see that this wasn't charity, that this was opportunity, that she was offering him something real, not just throwing money at a problem to make herself feel better. She spent the next 2 days rehearsing what she'd say, going over arguments and counter-arguments in her head, planning for every objection he might raise. But when she finally pulled up to his farmhouse 5 days later, all her careful planning evaporated. Caleb was replacing a rotted section of fence when he saw the car coming up the drive. Black sedan, too clean for country roads, moving slowly like the driver wasn't sure of the way. He knew who it was before the door even opened. Elena stepped out, and this time she'd dressed differently. Jeans instead of slacks, a plain jacket instead of something expensive and tailored. She still looked like she didn't quite belong, but she was trying. She walked toward him slowly, hands in her pockets, and Caleb set down the hammer he'd been holding. "Hi," she said. "Hi." She stopped a few feet away. "Your car running okay?" "Yeah, works fine. Thanks for asking." "Good." They stood there, awkward and uncertain. Caleb could feel his heart beating harder than it should, could feel something like hope trying to work its way up through the resignation he'd been carrying for months. "What are you doing here?" he asked, keeping his voice neutral. "I wanted to talk to you." "About what?" Elena glanced toward the house. "Is Sophie around?" "She's inside. Probably drawing or reading or getting into something she shouldn't. Why?" "Because I'd rather talk to you alone first, before things get complicated." Caleb's stomach tightened. "All right, talk." Elena took a breath, and he could see her gathering herself. Could see her shifting into business mode, the way people did when they were about to pitch something. "I know about the foreclosure," she said. His jaw went rigid. "How?" "Public records. I looked you up after I left." "You looked me up?" "Yes." "Why the hell would you do that?" "Because I wanted to help." Caleb laughed, sharp and bitter. The sound cut through the quiet afternoon like broken glass. "Here we go." "It's not what you think. You don't know what I think." "Then tell me." He stepped closer, and he could feel anger cracking through the calm he usually kept locked down. The frustration of months, of years, of watching everything slip away no matter how hard he worked. It all came bubbling up. "You think because you've got money, you can just swoop in and fix things," he said, voice low and hard. "You think I'm some project you can throw cash at and feel good about yourself. Poor farmer can't make it on his own, needs rescuing by the rich lady from the city." "That's not—" "I don't need your charity, Elena. I don't need you feeling sorry for me because I'm not living in some fancy apartment with a view. I don't need you playing savior. I don't feel sorry for you." "Then what the hell is this?" "It's an opportunity." She said it louder than she meant to, and it stopped him, made him actually look at her instead of just throwing his anger at her. She took another breath, steadying herself. "I bought the land around your farm, 200 acres. All the parcels that border your property, and I'm turning it into a sustainable agricultural operation, and I want you to run it." Caleb stared at her. The words didn't make sense. "What?" "I want you to manage the whole thing. Crop planning, livestock, staffing, operations, all of it. You've lost your mind. I'm completely serious. You don't even know me. You spent 3 days here and now you want to hand me control of 200 acres and however much money. What, millions? Tens of millions? I know enough." "You know nothing. You spent one night here because your car broke down. And I saw how you work," Elena interrupted. "I saw how you think. I saw how you take care of your daughter and this place even when it's falling apart around you." I saw you fix my car with tools that are older than I am and make it work anyway. I saw you help a complete stranger without asking for anything in return. She stepped closer. You're not a quitter, Caleb. Even when you should be. Even when anyone else would have walked away, you keep going. And I need someone like that. Someone who doesn't quit when things get hard. He shook his head. This is insane. Maybe, but it's real. Why? His voice came out quieter now, the anger draining into something closer to confusion. Why would you do this? Really? Elena hesitated. She could lie. She could tell him it was a business decision, a smart investment, something that made sense on paper and looked good in a portfolio. She'd prepared that speech. Had the numbers ready. But standing here looking at him, she couldn't do it. Because when I left here, she said slowly, I went back to my apartment and I couldn't stop thinking about you and Sophie, about this place, about the way you helped me without asking for anything, without expecting anything. She paused, trying to find the right words. I've spent my whole life building things that don't mean anything, companies that exist just to make money, deals that look impressive but don't actually matter. And I'm tired of it. I'm tired of waking up in that empty apartment and going to meetings with people I don't like and building things I don't care about. Her voice got quieter. And then I came here, and for 3 days I felt like what I was doing mattered, like the people around me were real, and I don't want to go back to how things were. I want to build something that actually means something, with people I actually care about. Caleb didn't say anything, just stood there looking at her like he was trying to decide if she was telling the truth. This isn't charity, Elena continued. It's a job, a real one. Salary, benefits, housing if you need it. Though I figured you'd want to stay here. You'll have full control over day-to-day operations, planting schedules, equipment purchases, staffing decisions, all of it. I'll handle the financing and long-term strategic planning, but the farm is yours to run. Your vision, your decisions. And if I say no, then I'll find someone else. But I'd rather it be you. He looked past her, toward the fields he'd been fighting to keep. Fields his father had worked. Fields his grandfather had cleared by hand. What happens to this place? He asked. My farm. It stays yours, I'm not touching it. The new operation is completely separate. Different parcels, different entity. But if you take the job... She paused. If you take the job, the salary will be enough to cover your mortgage payments. You'll be able to keep this place and work the new land. Both. You won't have to choose. Shit. Caleb's throat tightened. You've thought this through. I have. Down to every detail. That's what I do. And if it doesn't work, if I screw it up, if the crops fail or the operation loses money, or I make the wrong call, then we figure it out. Together. That's what partners do. Partners. Yes. Caleb wanted to say no. Every instinct told him to walk away, to not let this stranger upend his life with promises that sounded too good to be true, because things that sounded too good to be true usually were. But Sophie's voice echoed in his head. The bills in the drawer. The foreclosure notice on the wall. 21 days. I need to think about it, he said. That's fair. How long do I have? As long as you need, but Caleb... She met his eyes, and he saw something there that looked like honesty, like vulnerability. I meant what I said. This isn't about pity. You'd be doing me a favor as much as I'm doing you one. Maybe more. He almost believed her. I'll think about it, he said again. Elena nodded. Okay. She started to turn toward her car, then stopped. Can I see Sophie before I go, just to say hi? Yeah, she's inside. They walked to the house together. Sophie was at the kitchen table, surrounded by crayons and paper, working on something with intense concentration. Sophie, Caleb said, you've got a visitor. Sophie looked up and her face lit up like the sun. Elena! She jumped up and ran over, throwing her arms around Elena's waist. Elena hugged her back, and Caleb saw her eyes close for just a second, saw something shift in her expression. I finished your picture, Sophie said, pulling back. Want to see? I'd love to. Sophie dragged her to the table and showed her a drawing of 3 people, stick figures, but clearly people. A tall one with dark hair, a small one with a ponytail, and a third one with long hair, standing next to the other 2. That's me and Daddy, Sophie said, pointing, and that's you. It's beautiful, Elena said, and her voice sounded thick. You can keep it if you want. Really? Yeah, because you're family now. Elena looked at Caleb over Sophie's head, and something passed between them. Something neither of them had words for. Thank you, sweetheart, Elena said quietly. I'll treasure it. She stayed for another 20 minutes, talking to Sophie about school and drawings and a book Sophie was reading. Then she stood to leave. Think about what I said, she told Caleb at the door. I will. And call me. Even if the answer is no, I want to hear from you either way. Okay. She walked to her car, and this time, when she drove away, Caleb stood on the porch and watched until she was out of sight. Sophie came and stood next to him. Is Elena going to help us, Daddy? Maybe. I hope so. I like her. Yeah, Caleb said quietly. Me too. That night, after Sophie went to bed, Caleb sat at the kitchen table with a beer he wasn't drinking and stared at nothing. Elena's offer didn't make sense. People didn't do things like that. They didn't buy 200 acres of land and hand over control to someone they'd met once. They didn't offer jobs that solved every problem you had without asking for something in return. But she had. He thought about the way she'd looked at him when she'd said she was tired of building things that didn't mean anything. Like she'd spent her whole life chasing something and come up empty. Like she was as lost as he was, just in a different way. He knew that feeling. He pulled the foreclosure notice off the wall and read it again. 21 days, that's all he had. After that, the farm was gone. The house was gone. Everything his father and grandfather had built, just gone. He could take Elena's offer and keep it. He could give Sophie stability, a future, a home that didn't disappear because he couldn't make the payments. Or he could say no and lose everything out of pride. He crumpled the notice and threw it across the room. Pride was expensive, and he couldn't afford it anymore. Elena didn't hear from Caleb for 4 days. She told herself that was fine, that he needed time, that pushing him would only make things worse, that patience was a virtue and all those other things people said when they were trying not to go crazy waiting for an answer. But she checked her phone every 20 minutes anyway. On the 5th day, her lawyer called with an update on the permits. Everything's moving forward. We should have approval within the month. Good. But hold off on any actual construction. Why? Because I don't know if I have a manager yet. Ms. Whitmore, you can't build a multi-million-dollar agricultural operation without knowing who's going to run it. I know. That's why we're waiting. She hung up before he could argue further. She tried to focus on her other work. She had 3 deals in motion, a board meeting in 2 days, a keynote speech she was supposed to deliver next week that she hadn't started writing, but none of it held her attention. All she could think about was whether Caleb was going to call, and what she'd do if he didn't. On day 6, she almost drove back out to the farm, actually got in her car and made it halfway there before she turned around. This had to be his choice. She couldn't push, couldn't manipulate. If he said yes because she'd pressured him or guilted him or made him feel like he had no other option, then it wasn't real. And she needed it to be real. Sophie noticed something was wrong with her dad. Daddy, are you sad? She asked over breakfast on day 4. No, sweetheart, just tired. You're always tired. Yeah, well, that's what happens when you get old. You're not old. Tell that to my back. She giggled, but her eyes stayed serious, too serious for a 6-year-old. Are we going to have to move? Caleb's chest went tight. What? Emily at school said her family had to move because they didn't have enough money for their house anymore. Are we going to have to move? He set down his coffee. Who told you that? Nobody told me. I just heard you talking on the phone last week. To the bank. He should have known. Sophie heard everything, noticed everything. We're not moving, he said, and he hated that he might be lying. Promise? He looked at his daughter, her wide eyes, her messy hair from sleep, the crayon stains on her fingers that never quite washed out, and he couldn't lie to her. I'm working on it, he said. Is Elena going to help? What makes you think that? Because she's nice, and she's rich. Rich people can fix things. Caleb pulled her into a hug, kissing the top of her head. It's not that simple, kiddo. Why not? Because it just isn't. But later, after he'd dropped Sophie off at school and driven back to the empty house, he stood in the kitchen and pulled out his phone. He stared at Elena's number for a long time. 3 weeks. That's all he had left. He could keep fighting alone and lose everything, or he could take the hand someone was offering. He hit call. Elena answered on the second ring. Caleb? Yeah. Are you okay? I'm fine. He paused, suddenly not sure what to say. I've been thinking about your offer. And? I've got questions. Okay, ask. If I take this job, I want it in writing. Contract, terms, expectations, everything. I'm not doing this on a handshake. Done. My lawyer can have something drafted by end of week. And I want control, real control. You said I'd be managing operations, but I need to know that means I'm actually making decisions, not just taking orders and executing someone else's plan. You'll have full autonomy over day-to-day operations. I'll review quarterly reports and we'll discuss long-term strategy together. But the actual farming, the planting, the equipment, the crew, the schedules, that's all yours. And if we disagree on something, then we talk about it, like adults, like partners, and we figure it out. He almost smiled. What about Sophie? Elena's voice softened. What about her? This job, it's going to take time, long hours, especially at the start. I can't just leave her alone. I can't ask someone else to raise her while I'm working your farm. So bring her with you. There's a school in town, right? We can make it work. We'll figure out the logistics. And Caleb, she paused. I like Sophie. She's welcome anywhere I am. Always. Just like that. Just like that. Caleb closed his eyes. You're really serious about this. I am. Why? I already told you. Tell me again. There was a pause. Then Elena said quietly, because I'm tired of doing things that don't matter. Because I want to build something real. And because when I think about the future, when I try to picture what success looks like, you're in it. You and Sophie and that farm. That's what I see. Caleb let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. All right, he said. All right? Yeah, I'll do it. He heard her exhale on the other end of the line. Relief, maybe. Or something close to it. Okay, she said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. Okay, I'll have my lawyer draw up the contract. We can meet next week and go over everything. Make sure it's exactly what you want. Sounds good. Caleb? Yeah? Thank you. For what? For saying yes. For trusting me. He didn't know what to say to that, so he just said, see you next week. He hung up and sat down at the table, staring at the phone in his hand. He'd just agreed to let a woman he barely knew change his entire life. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was drowning. For the first time in years, he felt like maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. The first payment hit Caleb's account on a Friday morning, 2 weeks after he'd signed the contract. He was in the barn when his phone buzzed with the notification. He pulled it out, saw the number, and had to sit down on an overturned crate. 80,000 divided by 12, minus taxes. It was still more money than he'd seen in a single deposit in his entire life. He stared at the screen until it went dark, then called the bank. I need to make a payment, he said when someone finally answered. Account number? He rattled it off from memory. And how much would you like to pay today? Everything. I want to pay off the mortgage. There was a pause. Sir, your balance is $63,400 and I know what it is. Can I pay it or not? Yes, sir. Let me just pull up your account. It took 20 minutes to process. 20 minutes of hold music and verification questions, and the woman on the other end asking twice if he was sure. When it was done, she said, You're all set, Mr. Hayes. Your balance is now 0. Caleb hung up and sat there in the barn, listening to the chickens outside and the wind moving through the gaps in the walls. 0. He'd spent 3 years drowning, and now, just like that, he could breathe again. He thought about calling Elena to thank her, but he didn't know what he'd say. This wasn't her doing, exactly. She'd just given him a job. He'd earned the money. But without her, he'd be packing boxes right now, figuring out where the hell he and Sophie were going to go. Instead, he walked back to the house and pulled the foreclosure notice off the wall. He folded it once, twice, then shoved it in the trash. Sophie looked up from her cereal. What was that? Nothing, Caleb said. Just cleaning up. Yum. Construction started 3 days later. Heavy equipment rolled onto the adjacent land, tearing up fields that had been fallow for years. Caleb stood at the fence line, watching bulldozers and excavators move dirt like it weighed nothing. Elena showed up around noon in a truck that looked like she'd borrowed it from someone who actually used trucks. She climbed out and walked over, wearing boots this time instead of heels. "What do you think?" she asked. "It's loud." "It'll get louder." "Great," she smiled. "We're putting in irrigation first. Then the equipment barn and storage facilities. Housing for seasonal workers will come later. You've got this all mapped out." "I had a lot of help." Caleb glanced at her. "You do this kind of thing before? Buy farmland and turn it into a sustainable operation?" "No, first time." "That's comforting." "You worried?" "Little bit." Elena leaned against the fence. "You know what the difference is between people who succeed and people who fail?" "What?" "The ones who succeed don't wait until they know everything. They just start." "That's reckless." "Maybe, but it works." Caleb shook his head, but he was almost smiling. "You're crazy, you know that?" "I've been told." They stood there for a while, watching the machines work. Then Elena said, "I need you to hire a crew. People who know what they're doing. Farmhands, equipment operators, maybe a livestock manager if you think we need one." "How many people?" "Start with 5. We can scale up later." "You trust me to pick them?" "That's literally your job, Caleb." "Right, yeah." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I know a few guys, good workers, lost their jobs when the Colby farm went under last year." "Call them." "What if they say no?" "Then you find someone else." She looked at him. "You've got this. Stop second-guessing yourself." Caleb wanted to argue, but she was already walking back to the truck. He made the calls that afternoon. 3 of the 5 said yes immediately. The other 2 needed a day to think about it, but by the end of the week, Caleb had a full crew. They started the following Monday. Caleb met them at dawn near the new equipment barn, which was just a concrete slab and a skeleton of steel beams at that point. The men stood in a loose circle, hands in pockets, waiting. Caleb knew most of them, had worked alongside a few over the years, but standing in front of them now, as their boss, felt different. "All right," he said. "You all know why you're here. This is a big project, and it's going to take time to get it right. Miss Whitmore's putting a lot of trust in us, and I don't plan on screwing it up." One of the men, a guy named Ray with a gray beard and a limp, grunted. "She paying overtime?" "Yeah, time and a half after 40 hours. "Benefits?" "Health insurance kicks in after 90 days. Ray nodded. "Then I'm in." The others murmured agreement. Caleb walked them through the plan. Irrigation installation first, then soil testing, then planting rotations starting in the spring. It was November now, so they had time to get the infrastructure right before the growing season. "Any questions?" Caleb asked. A younger guy, maybe mid-20s, raised his hand. "What happens if this doesn't work? If the crops fail or whatever?" "Then we figure it out," Caleb said. "But failure's not the plan." "Easy to say when it's not your money." Caleb bristled. "You think I don't have skin in this? My farm's right next door. If this goes under, I'm out of a job just like you." The kid didn't have a response to that. "Look," Caleb said, softer now. "I get it. You're worried. Hell, I'm worried too. But we've all been on the wrong end of things before. This is a chance to do something that actually works. So let's do the job and see what happens." The men nodded, and Caleb felt some of the tension ease. They got to work. But Elena came by every few days, sometimes more. She'd walk the site, talk to the contractors, review progress reports. But mostly, she talked to Caleb. "How's the crew?" she asked one afternoon, watching the irrigation lines go in. "Good. Ray's a pain in the ass, but he knows what he's doing." "And the soil tests?" "Results come back next week." "Think they'll be good?" "Hope so. Otherwise, we're starting from scratch." Elena pulled a folder from her bag and handed it to him. "I've been working on a crop rotation plan. Take a look and tell me what you think." Caleb flipped through it. Corn, soybeans, cover crops to replenish nitrogen. It was smart. Conservative, but smart. "This'll work," he said. "You sure?" "Yeah." "Good. Because I have no idea what I'm doing." Caleb looked at her, surprised. "You wrote this whole thing." "I had help." a consultant I hired. But I wanted your opinion before we committed. Why? You're paying me to know this stuff. Exactly. So I'm asking. It was such a simple thing, but it hit Caleb harder than he expected. People didn't ask his opinion. They told him what to do, or they didn't bother asking at all. It's good, he said again. We should go with it. Elena smiled. Then that's what we'll do. Sophie loved the construction. She'd stand at the fence after school, watching the machines move, asking Caleb 100 questions he didn't always have answers to. What's that one doing? Digging a trench for the water lines. Why? So the crops can get water. Why can't they just use rain? Because rain's not always enough. Oh, she paused. Is Elena going to come today? I don't know, kiddo. I hope she does. I finished her picture. Caleb looked down at his daughter. You really like her, huh? Yeah, she's nice. She is. Do you like her? Caleb sighed. Sophie. It's okay if you do. I won't tell. There's nothing to tell. Sophie grinned like she knew better. Elena did come that day, pulling up just as the sun started to dip. Sophie ran to her before Caleb could stop her, waving the picture like a flag. I made this for you. Elena crouched down, taking the drawing carefully. It showed a house and some stick figures and what might have been a tractor. This is beautiful, Elena said. Is this your house? Yeah, and that's me and Daddy, and that's you. Elena looked at the third stick figure standing next to Caleb. I'm in the picture? Uh-huh, because you're part of the family now. Caleb's chest tightened. Sophie, thank you, Elena said softly, cutting him off. I love it. I'm going to hang it in my office. Sophie beamed. Later, after Sophie went inside, Elena stood with Caleb by the fence, holding the drawing. You don't have to hang it up, Caleb said. I want to. She gets attached easy. I don't want her thinking what? Caleb didn't know how to finish that sentence. Elena folded the drawing carefully. She's a sweet kid, Caleb, and she's right. I do feel like part of this. Maybe that's weird, but it's true. It's not weird. Good. They stood there not talking until the construction crew started packing up for the day. Thanksgiving came faster than Caleb expected. He'd planned to cook something simple, just him and Sophie, same as every year, but Sophie had other ideas. Can we invite Elena? She asked the week before. Sweetheart, she's probably got her own plans. Did you ask? No, but then ask. Caleb sighed. I'll think about it. But Sophie didn't let it go. She asked again the next day. And the day after that. Finally, Caleb broke down and called. Elena answered on the third ring. Hey, everything okay? Yeah, fine. Sophie wanted me to ask if you'd like to come for Thanksgiving. There was a pause. Really? You don't have to. I know you're probably busy. I'm not busy. Oh, I'd love to come. Caleb blinked. Okay, good. Thursday, around 2? I'll be there. He hung up and looked at Sophie, who was grinning like she'd won the lottery. She said yes, Caleb said. Sophie threw her arms in the air. Yes! No. Thursday arrived cold and clear. Caleb spent the morning cooking turkey, mashed potatoes, green beans, rolls from a can because he didn't have time to make them from scratch. Sophie helped, mostly by eating half the ingredients and asking when Elena was coming. She showed up at 2 on the dot, carrying a pie. I didn't make it, she admitted when Caleb opened the door. I bought it, but I thought it was better than showing up empty-handed. You didn't have to bring anything. I know. Sophie appeared behind Caleb. Is that pie? It is. Pumpkin. I love pumpkin. Elena handed it to her, and Sophie carried it to the kitchen like it was made of glass. They ate at the small table, crowded but comfortable. The food was good. Not fancy, but good. Sophie talked non-stop, and Elena listened, asking questions and laughing in all the right places. Caleb watched them, something warm and uncomfortable settling in his chest. After dinner, Sophie fell asleep on the couch, worn out from excitement. Caleb covered her with a blanket and joined Elena on the porch. Thank you for coming, he said. Thank you for inviting me. Sophie's idea. I figured, Elena smiled. But I'm glad she did. They sat in silence for a while, the kind that had become familiar. Can I ask you something? Elena said. Sure. Do you ever think about what comes next? After all this is built and running? Caleb shrugged. I try not to think too far ahead. It never works out the way you plan. Fair. Why? I don't know. I guess I'm just wondering what success looks like. For you. Caleb thought about it. Sophie being okay. That's success. That's it? Yeah, that's it. Elena looked at him, something soft in her expression. You're a good dad, Caleb. I'm trying. You're doing more than trying. He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. Elena stood. I should go. Let you get some rest. Yeah, okay. She started toward her car, then turned back. Caleb? Yeah? I'm really glad I met you. He smiled, small but real. Me too. She drove away, and Caleb stood on the porch long after her taillights disappeared, thinking about Thanksgiving and pumpkin pie and the way Sophie had said Elena was part of the family. Maybe she was. December brought cold that bit through jackets and gloves. The construction slowed but didn't stop. The irrigation system was finished, the equipment barn enclosed, and the soil tests came back better than expected. Caleb worked longer hours than he'd planned, but he didn't mind. There was something satisfying about watching the project take shape, about knowing his decisions mattered. Elena came by less often. She had year-end business to handle in the city, but she called every few days to check in. How's it going? She'd ask. Good. Ray's complaining about the cold, but we're on schedule. And Sophie? She's fine. Keeps asking when you're coming back. Tell her soon. I will. One night, after Sophie was asleep, Caleb sat at the kitchen table with a beer and his phone. He pulled up Elena's number and stared at it. He wanted to call her. Not about work, just to talk. But he didn't know what he'd say. Didn't know if she'd even want to hear from him outside of project updates. So he set the phone down and finished his beer in silence. Elena showed up 2 days before Christmas, unannounced. Caleb was in the barn when she pulled in, and he walked out to meet her. Didn't know you were coming, he said. Last-minute decision. She pulled a bag from the back seat. I brought gifts for Sophie. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. Sophie came running out, squealing when she saw Elena. You're here! You're here! Elena hugged her, laughing. I'm here. They went inside, and Sophie tore into the presents like it was already Christmas morning. Books, art supplies, a stuffed animal that looked like a fox. This is too much, Caleb said quietly. It's really not. Elena, let me do this, Caleb. Please. He didn't argue. Later, after Sophie went to bed clutching the fox, Caleb and Elena sat in the living room. The space heater hummed in the corner, and the lights from the small Christmas tree Sophie had insisted on blinked red and green. You doing okay? Elena asked. Yeah, you? Busy, but good. You spending Christmas in the city? Elena hesitated. I don't know yet. You got family? Not really. My parents are gone. No siblings. It's just me. Caleb looked at her, saw the loneliness she tried to hide. You could stay here, if you want. Elena's eyes widened. What? For Christmas. You could stay. Sophie would love it. Caleb, I can't just shh. Why not? She didn't have an answer. Look, Caleb said, I'm not great at this stuff, but you've done a lot for us. And Sophie's right. You are part of this. So if you don't have anywhere else to be, then be here. Elena's throat tightened. Okay. Yeah? Yeah. But Christmas morning was chaos. Sophie woke them both up at dawn, dragging Elena out of the guest room Caleb had hastily cleaned the night before. They opened presents by the tree. Small things, nothing extravagant, and ate pancakes that Caleb burned slightly, but no one complained about. Sophie played with her new toys while Caleb and Elena cleaned up. Thank you, Elena said quietly, for letting me stay. You're welcome here any time. I mean it, Caleb. She gestured around the small house. This is the best Christmas I've had in years. He looked at her, really looked, and saw the truth in her eyes. Me too, he said. Nah, ma'am. The project hit a snag in early January. One of the contractors had installed the wrong type of fencing, and it all had to be torn out and redone. It cost time and money, and Caleb spent 3 days on the phone trying to sort it out. Elena came down as soon as she heard. "How bad is it?" she asked. "Bad. We're 2 weeks behind schedule now. Can we make it up?" "Maybe, but it's going to cost." "How much?" Caleb told her. Elena didn't flinch. "Do it." Elena, do it. We're not cutting corners." He nodded, relieved. They walked the fence line together, Caleb pointing out where the work needed to be redone. Elena listened, asked questions, didn't panic. "You're good at this," Caleb said. "At what?" "Staying calm when things go wrong." Elena laughed. "I've had a lot of practice." "Yeah?" "Yeah, you don't build a business without things going sideways constantly." "How do you deal with it?" "I remind myself that problems are just puzzles, and puzzles have solutions." Caleb smiled. "That's a nice way of looking at it." "It's the only way I know, Shai." By February, the worst of the delays were behind them. The fencing was fixed, the equipment barn fully operational, and Caleb had hired 2 more crew members to help with planting prep. Elena came by on a Saturday, bringing lunch from a deli in town. They ate in the barn, sitting on hay bales, talking about crop yields and market prices. "You sound like a farmer," Elena said. "I am a farmer." "No, I mean, you sound confident, like you know what you're doing." "I'm faking it." "You're not." Caleb set down his sandwich. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why'd you really do this? And don't say it's because you wanted to build something that mattered. There's more to it than that." Elena was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "When I left here that first time, I went back to my life and realized I hated it. Every single part of it. The apartment, the meetings, the people who only cared about what I could do for them." She paused. "And then I thought about you and Sophie, about the way you helped me without asking for anything, and I wanted that. I wanted to be part of something real." "So this is about you?" "Yeah, it is." She met his eyes. "Is that selfish?" "No," Caleb said. "It's honest." They sat there, the silence heavy but not uncomfortable. "I'm glad you came back," Caleb said finally. "Me too." March brought warmer weather and the start of planting season. The crew worked dawn to dusk, turning soil and laying seed. Caleb was everywhere at once, checking equipment, solving problems, making sure everything stayed on track. Elena watched from a distance, letting him work, stepping in only when he asked. One evening, after the crew had gone home, Caleb found her sitting on the porch of the new office building they'd constructed near the equipment barn. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" "About how different this place looks now. 3 months ago, it was nothing, and now it's something." "Yeah." Caleb sat down next to her. "You did this. We did this." He smiled. "Yeah, we did." They sat together as the sun set, painting the sky orange and pink, and for the first time in longer than Caleb could remember, he felt like things might actually be okay. The rhythm of the farm settled into something steady by April. The fields were planted, the irrigation system hummed through the nights, and the crew had found their groove. Caleb spent most of his days outdoors, walking the rows, checking growth patterns, troubleshooting problems before they became disasters. He came home tired every night, but it was a different kind of tired than before. This exhaustion came with progress, with purpose. Elena had been coming out more often, sometimes staying for a few days at a time. She'd converted one of the rooms in the new office building into a makeshift workspace, and Caleb would see her through the window at odd hours, laptop open, phone pressed to her ear. "You don't have to stay out here," he told her one afternoon when he found her reviewing spreadsheets on the porch. "You've got that whole apartment in the city." "I know." "So why are you here?" Elena looked up at him, squinting against the sun. "Because this is where the work is. The work's running itself at this point. Then maybe I just like it here." Caleb didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and went back to fixing the gate on the livestock pen. But he thought about it later when he was alone. The way she'd said it so simply, like it didn't need explaining, like liking something was reason enough. Sophie had noticed too. She'd started asking when Elena was coming back before she'd even left, planning things they could do together, drawings to show her, stories to tell. It made Caleb nervous in a way he couldn't quite articulate. "You're getting attached," he told Sophie one night at dinner. "So? So what happens when she stops coming around?" Sophie frowned. "Why would she stop?" "Because she's got her own life, kiddo. This isn't permanent." "How do you know?" "I just do." But Sophie didn't look convinced, and honestly, neither was Caleb. So, the first real test came in mid-April when a late frost hit overnight, threatening the young crops. Caleb got the call from Ray at 4 in the morning. "We got a problem," Ray said, voice rough from sleep. "Temperature dropped below freezing. Some of the early corn's going to take a hit." Caleb was out of bed and dressed in under 2 minutes. He called the crew, told them to meet him at the main field, then drove through the dark with his headlights cutting through fog. When he arrived, Elena was already there. She stood at the edge of the field in jeans and a jacket, arms crossed, staring at the rows of young stalks that were starting to show frost damage. "How'd you know?" Caleb asked, walking up beside her. "Ray called me too." "You didn't have to come out." "Yeah, I did." The crew arrived in trucks, headlights forming a half circle around the field. Caleb gathered them together and started giving orders. They needed to assess the damage, figure out how much they'd lost, and decide whether to replant or wait and see if the crops could recover. It took all day. They walked every row, tagged the damaged sections, took soil samples. By the time the sun started dropping, they had a rough count. 30% loss in the northeast field, maybe more. Caleb sat on the tailgate of his truck, staring at the numbers he'd scribbled in a notebook. Elena sat next to him. "How bad?" she asked. "Bad. Not catastrophic, but bad." "Can we recover?" "Yeah. We replant the damaged sections, adjust the rotation schedule, and we should be okay by harvest." "How much will it cost?" Caleb told her. Elena nodded slowly. "Do it." "You sure? That's a big hit." "I'm sure." Caleb looked at her. "You don't even flinch, do you?" "At what?" "Money, problems, any of it." Elena shrugged. "Flinching doesn't fix anything." "No, but most people would at least hesitate." "I'm not most people." Caleb almost smiled. "No, you're not." They sat in silence for a while, watching the crew pack up their tools and head home. The sky was deep purple now, stars starting to show. "You ever think we're crazy for doing this?" Caleb asked. "Every day." "But you keep going." "So do you." "I don't have a choice." Elena turned to him. "Yes, you do. You could walk away anytime, find another job, take Sophie somewhere easier." "And do what?" "I don't know. But you stay because you want to, not because you have to." Caleb thought about that. She was right in a way. He could have said no to this whole thing, could have let the farm go, started over somewhere else. But he hadn't. "Why do you stay?" he asked. Elena looked out at the field. "Because for the first time in my life, I'm building something I actually care about. It's just crops. It's not just crops." She met his eyes. "It's you and Sophie and this place. It's real, and I've spent too long on things that aren't." Caleb felt something shift in his chest, something warm and dangerous. "Elena, I should go," she said, standing abruptly. "It's late. I'll see you tomorrow." She was in her car and gone before he could say anything else. The replanting took a week. They worked through rain and mud and equipment breakdowns, but they got it done. By the end of April, the fields looked healthy again, and the crisis had passed. Caleb threw a small barbecue for the crew to celebrate, setting up grills behind the equipment barn. Ray brought beer. Someone else brought a cooler full of soda for the couple of guys who didn't drink, and they spent the evening eating burgers and swapping stories. Elena came, standing slightly apart from the group at first, until Sophie dragged her over to sit with the crew. They made room for her, and Caleb watched as she laughed at Ray's terrible jokes and listened to the younger guys talk about their plans for the summer. She fit. That was the thing that struck him. She didn't try too hard or talk down to anyone. She just fit. Later, when most of the crew had gone home and Sophie had fallen asleep on a blanket under the stars, Caleb and Elena sat by the dying fire. "That was nice," Elena said. "Yeah. Your crew likes you. They like getting paid." It's more than that. They respect you. Caleb poked the fire with a stick. They respect the job. I just happen to be the one running it. You don't give yourself enough credit. Maybe. Elena pulled her jacket tighter. Can I ask you something? Sure. What happened to Sophie's mom? Caleb went still. He'd known this question would come eventually, but he still wasn't ready for it. She left, he said finally. When? Sophie was 2, just packed a bag one morning and left. Did she say why? Said she couldn't do it anymore. The farm, the debt, the kid, all of it. Caleb's voice was flat, like he was reciting facts. She wanted a different life, so she went and got one. Do you ever hear from her? No. She signed away her rights, didn't want anything to do with Sophie. Elena was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry. Don't be. We're better off. Are you? Caleb looked at her. Yeah, we are. Sophie doesn't need someone who didn't want her, and I sure as hell don't need someone who quit when things got hard. That's fair. You ever been married? Caleb asked. No? Close? Once. Long time ago. He wanted me to give up my career, stay home, be someone I wasn't. She paused. I chose the career. Regret it? No. But sometimes I wonder what it would have been like to have someone. It's overrated. Elena smiled. Is it? Most of the time. They sat there, the fire crackling between them, and Caleb felt the question he'd been avoiding for weeks pressing against the inside of his ribs. Why do you keep coming back here? He asked quietly. Elena didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because when I'm here, I don't feel alone. Caleb's throat tightened. He wanted to say something, wanted to tell her he felt the same way, but the words stuck. Instead, he reached over and took her hand. Elena looked down at their joined hands, then up at him. She didn't pull away. They sat like that until the fire burned down to embers, Sophie sleeping a few feet away, the night quiet around them. May brought warmer weather and longer days. The crops were thriving, and the operation was running smoother than Caleb had dared to hope. He'd hired 2 more people, bringing the crew up to 7, and they'd started planning for the livestock expansion Elena wanted to add in the fall. But something had shifted between him and Elena, and they both felt it. She still came out to the farm, still reviewed reports and made decisions, but there was a carefulness now that hadn't been there before. They didn't sit as close, didn't let conversations drift into personal territory. It was Sophie who finally called them out. Are you and Elena fighting? She asked one night while Caleb was tucking her in. What? No, why would you think that? Because she's being weird, and you're being weird. We're not being weird. Sophie gave him a look that said she didn't believe him. Did you say something mean? No. Did she? No, Sophie, we're fine. Then why doesn't she eat dinner with us anymore? Caleb didn't have an answer for that. The next day, he drove out to the office building and found Elena at her desk, buried in paperwork. We need to talk, he said. Elena looked up. About what? About this. He gestured between them. Whatever this is. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. Elena set down her pen. Caleb, Sophie thinks we're fighting, and she's not wrong. We've been avoiding each other for 2 weeks. I've been busy. Bullshit. Elena flinched. Caleb never swore, not around Sophie, and rarely even when she wasn't there. He sat down across from her. Look, I don't know what's happening here, but I know something is, and I think we need to figure it out before it gets worse. What do you want me to say? The truth. Elena stood, walking to the window. She stared out at the fields for a long time. I'm scared, she said finally. Of what? Of this. Of caring too much. Of screwing it up. You're not going to screw it up. You don't know that. Neither do you. She turned to face him. I've built my whole life on control, Caleb, on knowing the outcome before I make a move. And this, you and Sophie and this place, I don't know how it ends, and that terrifies me. Caleb stood, closing the distance between them. You think I'm not scared? I've got a kid who's already attached to you. I've got a job that depends on you. And somewhere along the way I started... He stopped. Started what? Elena asked softly. Caring about you. More than I should. The words hung between them, heavy and real. Elena's eyes searched his face. Caleb, I know it's complicated. I know there's 1,000 reasons this is a bad idea, but I can't keep pretending I don't feel it. What if it doesn't work? What if it does? Elena looked at him, and he saw the war happening behind her eyes. Fear and hope, and something that looked like longing. I don't want to hurt Sophie, she said. Then don't. It's not that simple. Why not? Because if this falls apart, it's not just us. It's her too. And I can't... Her voice broke. I can't be another person who leaves her. Caleb stepped closer, close enough that he could see the tears she was fighting. Then don't leave, he said quietly. You don't know what you're asking. Yeah, I do. Elena closed her eyes. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. But we can figure it out. She opened her eyes, and the fear was still there. But so was something else. Something that looked like yes. Okay, she whispered. Yeah? Yeah. Caleb reached up, cupping her face gently, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. He kissed her, soft and careful, and she kissed him back. When they pulled apart, Elena let out a shaky breath. We're really doing this, she said. Looks like it. Sophie's going to lose her mind. Caleb smiled. Probably. They told Sophie the next day, sitting her down at the kitchen table like it was some kind of official announcement. So, Caleb started, already feeling awkward. You know how you've been asking if Elena and I are friends. Sophie nodded, eyes wide. Well, we're still friends, but we're also... He looked at Elena for help. We care about each other, Elena said, in a different way than just friends. Sophie blinked. Then her face split into the biggest grin Caleb had ever seen. Are you boyfriend and girlfriend? Yes, Elena said, saving him. We are. Sophie squealed and launched herself at Elena, hugging her so hard she almost knocked her chair over. I knew it! I knew it! Caleb shook his head, smiling despite himself. You're not surprised? No, you guys look at each other all the time. We do not. Yes, you do. Sophie turned to Elena. Does this mean you're going to live here? I don't know yet, sweetheart. We're taking it slow. But you'll visit more, right? Definitely. Sophie hugged her again, then ran outside, probably to tell the chickens or the trees or anyone who would listen. Caleb looked at Elena. Well, that went better than expected. She's a good kid. She loves you. Elena's eyes softened. I love her too. Caleb reached across the table, taking her hand. We're going to be okay. You sound pretty sure about that. I am. Elena squeezed his hand. I hope you're right. The next few weeks were strange and wonderful and occasionally awkward. They didn't announce anything to the crew, but word got around anyway. Ray made a joke about the boss getting lucky, and one of the younger guys asked if this meant they'd get better Christmas bonuses. Caleb ignored them and kept working. Elena started staying over more, sleeping in the guest room to keep things appropriate for Sophie. But sometimes, after Sophie was asleep, she and Caleb would sit on the porch and talk until the early hours, about everything and nothing. What do you want? Elena asked him one night. Long term, I mean. Caleb thought about it. This. Sophie safe and happy, the farm running, you here. That's it? That's everything. Elena leaned her head on his shoulder. I used to think I wanted more. Bigger house, more money, more success. But I think I just wanted to matter. You matter. I know, that's the weird part. I finally believe it. They sat in comfortable silence, the night sounds of the farm settling around them. I'm glad you broke down on that road, Caleb said. Elena laughed. Me too. Well, June brought the first real conflict. Elena's business partner in the city called, wanting her to come back for an important deal. It would take a week, maybe 2, and it couldn't wait. I have to go, she told Caleb. This is a $20 million contract. I can't just walk away from it. I know, but I'll be back, I promise. I know that too. Sophie took it harder. She cried when Elena packed her bag, and Caleb had to explain 3 times that Elena wasn't leaving forever, just for a little while. But what if she doesn't come back? Sophie asked, voice small. She will. How do you know? Because she loves us, and people who love you don't just disappear. Elena overheard from the doorway. She came in and knelt in front of Sophie. Your dad's right. I'm coming back. This is home now, okay? Sophie nodded, wiping her eyes. Elena left the next morning, and the house felt emptier than it had in months. Caleb threw himself into work, keeping busy so he wouldn't think about how much he missed her. It had only been a few months, but somehow Elena had become part of the fabric of their lives, and her absence left holes. She called every night, talking to Sophie first, then to him. The conversations were never long enough. How's the deal going? Caleb asked. Slowly, but we're getting there. You okay? Tired. I forgot how exhausting this life is. You miss it? Elena was quiet for a moment. No, I miss you. Caleb's chest tightened. We miss you too. I'll be home soon. Home. She'd called it home. Hurry up, Caleb said. Elena laughed. I will. She came back 12 days later, pulling up to the house just as the sun was setting. Sophie saw her first and ran out screaming, throwing herself into Elena's arms. Caleb stood on the porch, watching them, something fierce and protective rising in his chest. Elena looked up at him over Sophie's head, and he saw everything he needed to see in her eyes. She was back, and she was staying. That night, after Sophie finally fell asleep after an hour of showing Elena everything she'd done while she was gone, Caleb and Elena sat on the porch. How was the city? He asked. Loud, crowded, empty. Empty? Yeah, I walked into my apartment and it just felt hollow, like it belonged to someone else. Maybe it does. Elena looked at him. I've been thinking about selling it, the apartment, maybe getting something smaller, something I actually use. You don't have to do that. I want to. I don't need all that space. I just need... She gestured around. This. Caleb took her hand. You're sure? I'm sure. They sat together, and Caleb felt the last piece of doubt fall away. This was real. This was happening. And for the first time since his ex-wife had walked out, he let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, things could work out. I love you, he said quietly. Elena turned to him, eyes wide. What? I love you. I probably have for a while now. I needed you to know. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. I love you too. Caleb kissed her, slow and deep, and felt something in his chest unlock. When they pulled apart, Elena was crying for real now, but she was laughing too. We're really doing this, she said. Yeah, we are. And for the first time in longer than either of them could remember, the future didn't look scary. It looked like home. Summer hit hard that year, the kind of heat that made the air shimmer over the fields and turned the ground to dust by mid-afternoon. But the crops didn't seem to mind. The corn stood tall and green, the soybeans spread thick across the eastern plots, and the new irrigation system Caleb had fought so hard to get right kept everything alive, even when the rain stopped coming for weeks at a time. Elena moved out of the city apartment in July. She didn't make a big deal about it, just hired movers and had everything packed up in a weekend. Most of it went into storage. The rest, clothes, books, a few pieces of art she actually cared about, came to the farm. Caleb helped her unpack in the guest room, which they'd both stopped pretending was temporary. You sure about this? He asked, setting down a box marked fragile. I already sold the place, Caleb. Little late for second thoughts. I'm serious. Elena stopped and looked at him. So am I. I'm where I want to be. Even with the heat and the dust and Sophie asking you 1,000 questions every single day? Especially with that. Caleb smiled. All right then. She crossed the room and kissed him, slow and easy, like they had all the time in the world. And maybe they did. Sophie appeared in the doorway, making a gagging sound. You guys are gross. You're the one who wanted this, Caleb pointed out. I wanted you to be happy, not kiss all the time. Can't have one without the other, kiddo. Sophie rolled her eyes, but she was grinning. Elena, can we go to town later? I need new shoes. Sure. After lunch? Yes. Sophie ran off, already planning the trip in her head. Elena shook her head. That kid has more energy than the entire crew combined. Tell me about it. They finished unpacking in comfortable silence, and Caleb felt something settle in his chest that had been restless for years. This was what home was supposed to feel like. Not perfect, not easy, but right. The first harvest came in August. It was earlier than expected. The heat had accelerated everything, but the yields were good, better than good. The crew worked around the clock, bringing in corn and soybeans, filling the new storage facilities they'd built in the spring. Caleb stood in the middle of the main field one evening, watching the combines move in formation, and felt something close to pride. They'd done it. Against the odds, against the frost and the delays and every other thing that had tried to stop them, they'd actually done it. Elena found him there, walking out through the rows with 2 bottles of beer. "Thought you could use this," she said, handing him one. "Thanks." They stood together, drinking in silence, watching the sun drop toward the horizon. "We did good," Elena said. "Yeah, we did." "You know what this means?" "What?" "We're profitable. The operation's in the black." Caleb looked at her. "Already?" "Already. I ran the numbers this morning. Between the crop sales and the contracts we've lined up for next year, we're not just breaking even, we're actually making money." "Huh. That's it, huh?" Caleb laughed. "I don't know what else to say. I'm still getting used to things not falling apart." Elena leaned against him. "Get used to it. Because this is just the beginning." But success brought new problems. By September, word had gotten out about the operation, and Caleb started getting calls from investors, from agricultural companies, from people who wanted to buy in or partner up or acquire the whole thing outright. Elena fielded most of them, but one call came directly to Caleb's phone. A man named Marcus Hendricks, CEO of some agribusiness conglomerate Caleb had never heard of. "Mr. Hayes, I've been following your operation with great interest," Hendricks said, voice smooth and practiced. "What you and Miss Whitmore have built is impressive. I'd like to discuss a partnership." "We're not looking for partners." "Hear me out. We can scale what you're doing, triple your acreage, quadruple your revenue. We have the resources, the distribution networks, the expertise. We're doing fine on our own. For now. But agriculture is a volatile business. One bad season and everything you've built could disappear." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Thanks for the call, Mr. Hendricks. But we're not interested." He hung up before the man could respond. Elena came in a few minutes later looking concerned. "I just got off the phone with Hendricks. Yeah, he called me too." "What'd you tell him?" "I told him no." Elena nodded slowly. "Good, because I told him the same thing. You think he'll back off?" "Guys like Hendricks don't back off, but we'll deal with it if we have to." Caleb wanted to believe her, but something about the call sat wrong with him. Men like Hendricks didn't take no for an answer. They just found other ways to get what they wanted. He was right to worry. 2 weeks later, Ray pulled him aside during the morning shift. "Boss, we got a problem." "What kind of problem?" 3 of the crew got offers yesterday. From Hendricks AgriCorp, double their current salary, benefits package, the whole deal. Caleb's stomach dropped. Did they take it? Not yet, but they're thinking about it. Who? Ray rattled off 3 names. Good workers. People Caleb had personally hired and trained. Damn it. Yeah. Caleb found Elena in the office, already on the phone with her lawyer. "I know about Hendricks," she said when she hung up. "He's trying to poach our crew. Can he do that?" "Legally? Yeah. We can't stop people from taking better offers." "So what do we do?" Elena thought for a moment. "We match the offers, and we make sure everyone knows they're valued here." "Can we afford that?" "Can we afford to lose them?" Caleb nodded. "I'll talk to them." He gathered the 3 crew members that afternoon, meeting them in the equipment barn away from everyone else. "I heard about the offers," Caleb said without preamble, "and I get it. Double salary is hard to turn down." The men shifted uncomfortably. "But I want you to know what you'd be walking into," Caleb continued. "Hendricks runs factory farms. You'd be a number on a spreadsheet. Here, you're part of something we're building together." "With all due respect, boss," one of them said, "we got families to feed. Principals don't pay the bills." "You're right, they don't." Caleb took a breath. So we're matching the offers, same salary, same benefits. And I'm adding profit sharing. You help make this place successful, you get a piece of it. The men looked at each other. You're serious? Another asked. Yeah, I am. Why? Because you're worth it. And because I'm not going to let Hendricks gut this operation just to prove a point. The men agreed to stay. Word spread quickly, and by the end of the week, the whole crew knew that Caleb and Elena had their backs. But Hendricks wasn't done. The real attack came in October, just as they were preparing for the second harvest. Caleb got a call from the county inspector's office, informing him that there had been complaints about their operation. Environmental violations, unsafe working conditions, improper waste disposal. None of it was true. Caleb spent 3 days with inspectors crawling over every inch of the farm, reviewing permits, checking equipment, interviewing crew members. In the end, they found nothing, because there was nothing to find. This was Hendricks, Elena said when the inspectors finally left. He's trying to bury us in red tape. Can he do that? He can try, but it'll cost him too. Filing false complaints, harassment, our lawyers building a case. How long will that take? Months, maybe longer. Caleb felt the weight of it pressing down. I'm tired of fighting. Elena took his hand. I know, but we don't have a choice. If we back down now, we lose everything. Maybe we should just sell, take the money and walk away. You don't mean that. Caleb looked at her. Don't I? We've been fighting since the beginning. The bank, the weather, now this guy. When does it end? When we make it end. Elena's voice was firm. We built this, Caleb, you and me, and I'm not giving it up because some corporate asshole thinks he can bully us. Caleb wanted to argue, but he saw the fire in her eyes and knew she was right. All right, he said, we fight. The lawsuit took 4 months to resolve. Elena's lawyers were good, and they had the documentation to prove every complaint Hendricks had filed was baseless. In the end, Hendricks settled out of court, agreeing to cease all hostile actions and pay damages. It wasn't a huge victory, but it was enough. By the time winter rolled around again, things had finally started to calm down. The farm was running smoothly, the crew was stable, and the second harvest had been even better than the first. Caleb and Elena sat in the office one evening in December, reviewing the year-end reports. We did it, Elena said, closing her laptop. We actually did it. Feels weird, doesn't it? What does? Winning. Elena smiled. Yeah, it does. Caleb leaned back in his chair. What's next? What do you mean? I mean, we've got the farm running, the crew's solid, we're profitable. What's the next big thing? Elena was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking about that, and I think the next big thing isn't about the farm. What's it about? Us. Caleb's heart kicked up. Us? Elena came around the desk and sat on the edge, close enough that their knees touched. I love you, Caleb, and I love Sophie, and I love this life we've built, but I want it to be permanent, not just coasting along and hoping it works out. What are you saying? Elena reached into her pocket and pulled out a small box. Caleb stared at it. I know this is unconventional, Elena said, voice shaking slightly, and I know traditionally the guy's supposed to ask, but I'm not traditional, and you already knew that. Elena, marry me, Caleb. Let's make this official. Let's be a family. Caleb felt his throat close up. He looked at the woman in front of him, the one who'd walked into his life by accident and stayed on purpose, the one who'd saved his farm and stolen his heart and loved his daughter like her own. Yes, he said. Yeah? Yeah. Elena laughed, tears streaming down her face, and opened the box. Inside was a simple silver band. I didn't know your size, so we might have to resize it. Caleb kissed her, cutting off the words, and when they pulled apart, they were both crying and laughing at the same time. We should tell Sophie, Elena said. She's going to lose her mind. I know. They walked back to the house together, hand in hand, and found Sophie in the living room building something elaborate out of blocks. Hey, kiddo, Caleb said. We got news. Sophie looked up. What kind of news? Elena knelt down beside her. The kind where I asked your dad to marry me, and he said yes. Sophie's eyes went wide. Then she screamed, launching herself at both of them, and they all went down in a heap on the floor, laughing and crying and holding each other. "Does this mean you're going to be my mom?" Sophie asked when she finally calmed down. Elena's breath caught. "If that's okay with you." "It's more than okay. It's perfect." They got married in the spring, right there on the farm with the crew as witnesses and Sophie as the flower girl. It was small and simple and exactly what they both wanted. Ray gave a speech that was mostly jokes, but ended with something surprisingly heartfelt about second chances and building something that lasts. The crew cheered, Sophie cried happy tears, and Caleb kissed his wife while the sun set over the fields they'd planted together. That night, after everyone had gone home and Sophie was asleep, Caleb and Elena stood on the porch looking out at the farm. "You know what I realized?" Elena said. "What?" "I spent my whole life chasing success, building businesses, making money, proving I was good enough. And I thought that's what would make me happy. And it turns out happiness was never about any of that. It was about this, about finding people who matter and building something real with them." Caleb pulled her closer. "Took you long enough to figure that out." "Better late than never." "True." They stood there in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the farm settling for the night. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. The wind moved through the crops, life continuing, steady and sure. "I'm glad your car broke down that night," Caleb said. Elena laughed. "Me too." "You think we would have met any other way?" "No. I think it had to happen exactly like it did." "A fate, huh?" "Maybe, or maybe just dumb luck. I'll take it either way." Elena turned in his arms, looking up at him. "I love you, Caleb Hayes." "I love you too, Elena Hayes." It still felt strange hearing her with his last name. Good strange. The kind of strange that meant everything had changed in the best possible way. That's 5 years later, the farm had grown into something neither of them had imagined that first night. They'd expanded the operation, added dairy cows and free-range chickens, started a farmer's market in town that drew people from 3 counties over. The crew had grown to 20, and Ray had retired last year with a pension package that made him tear up, even though he tried to hide it. Sophie was 11 now, tall and lanky and full of opinions. She helped around the farm when she felt like it, spent most of her free time drawing or reading, and had recently announced that she wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. "Not a farmer?" Caleb had asked. "Maybe both," Sophie had said with a shrug. "I haven't decided yet." Elena had laughed and ruffled her hair. "You've got time, sweetheart." They'd had another addition to the family, too. A little boy they'd named Thomas, who was 3 years old now and followed Caleb everywhere, asking endless questions about tractors and chickens and why the sky was blue. Caleb had never thought he'd have this. A wife who loved him, 2 kids who were healthy and happy, work that mattered, a home that felt solid. But here it was, real and messy and beautiful. One evening in late summer, the whole family sat on the porch after dinner. Sophie was showing Thomas how to catch fireflies in a jar, and Elena leaned against Caleb, watching them. "You think they'll want to run this place someday?" Elena asked. "Maybe, maybe not. Long as they're happy, I don't care what they do." "You've gotten soft." "Have I?" "Yeah, but I like it." Caleb kissed the top of her head. "I'm glad." Sophie came running up, jar full of blinking lights. "Look, we got 12. "That's a lot," Elena said. "Can we keep them?" "Only if you let them go before bed." Sophie nodded solemnly and ran back to Thomas. Caleb watched his daughter, then his son, then looked at his wife. And he thought about that night 5 years ago when a stranger had knocked on his door, desperate and lost. He thought about how close he'd come to losing everything. And he thought about how one act of kindness, one decision to help someone who needed it, had changed the entire trajectory of his life. People talk about fate like it's some grand design, like everything happens for a reason. Caleb didn't know if he believed that. But he believed in choices. He believed that how you treat people matters, that kindness counts, that sometimes the best things in life come from the moments when you decide to open the door instead of keeping it closed. He'd been drowning when Elena showed up, barely holding on, one bad week away from losing everything. And she'd been drowning too, in a different way. lost in a life that looked successful on the outside but felt empty inside. They'd saved each other, not in some dramatic, sweeping way, but in the small moments, the shared meals, the hard conversations, the decision to show up and keep showing up even when it was easier to walk away. That's what love was, Caleb had learned. Not the big gestures or the perfect moments, but the choice to stay, to build, to believe that what you were creating together was worth the work. Elena squeezed his hand, and he squeezed back. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "How lucky I am." Luck had nothing to do with it. "No? No, you worked for this. We both did." "I guess we did." Sophie released the fireflies, and they watched the light scatter into the darkness, little sparks of brightness against the night. Thomas climbed into Caleb's lap, already half asleep, and Caleb held his son close. "Daddy?" Sophie asked, sitting down on the porch steps. "Yeah? Do you think we'll always be together? Like this?" Caleb looked at Elena, then back at his daughter. "I think as long as we keep choosing each other, we will be. What if something bad happens? Then we deal with it, together." Sophie nodded, satisfied with that answer. Later, after the kids were in bed and the house was quiet, Caleb and Elena sat on the porch one last time. "You think we did good?" Caleb asked. "With what?" "All of it, the farm, the kids, this life." Elena was quiet for a moment. "Yeah, I think we did better than good." "You have any regrets?" "Not a single one." Caleb pulled her close, and they sat there in the darkness, listening to the night sounds of the farm, the crickets and the distant lowing of cattle and the wind moving through the crops. This was home, not the house or the land or any physical place, but this, the people, the connection, the life they'd built together from nothing. And as Caleb sat there with his wife in his arms and his children sleeping safe inside, he realized something fundamental. Success wasn't measured in money or acreage or how much you owned. It was measured in moments like this, in the people who showed up, in the love you gave and received. He'd spent years thinking he was failing because he couldn't keep the farm afloat alone, but he'd been asking the wrong question. It was never about doing it alone. It was about finding the people who wanted to build something with you, who saw you struggling and offered a hand, who stayed when things got hard because they believed in what you were creating together. Elena had given him that, and he'd given it back to her. They'd saved each other. And in doing so, they'd built something neither of them could have built alone. The farm thrived not because of money or luck, but because it was built on something real: partnership, trust, love. And that, Caleb thought, was worth more than anything money could buy. "I love you," he said into the darkness. "I love you too," Elena replied. And in that moment, sitting on the porch of the home they'd built together, surrounded by the life they'd created, Caleb Hayes finally understood what it meant to have everything. Not perfection, not ease, but something better: purpose, family, home. And that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.